Welcome to The Deep Dive, the show where we really get into the weeds of complex source material. We try to treat these cultural artifacts as, well, keys to understanding the world around us.
Exactly. Offering you, hopefully, a faster route than just consuming stuff. We want to get at the deeper meanings, the implications of the things we all create and engage with.
Today, we're doing something pretty intense. It's a deep, transdisciplinary analysis of just one song. That song is Fed Up by Ghostemane, Eric Whitney.
And we're arguing this track isn't just, noise for a mosh pit, though it definitely functions that way, too. We're positioning it as a kind of sophisticated diagnostic tool.
A tool for what, exactly?
For examining some really critical failure points in, well, contemporary life. Things like celebrity, wealth, mental health, how they intersect, and honestly, how they often collapse.
Okay, so for listeners who maybe aren't deep into this particular scene, Ghostemane, he's a huge figure, right, in trap metal, industrial hip-hop.
Oh, absolutely fundamental. He carved out this unique space, fusing these really dark, occult aesthetics with lyrics that are just steeped in nihilism, depression, death. It's visceral stuff.
And Fed Up comes from his 2020 album Anti-Icon. The title alone tells you a lot.
It really does. Fed Up is exactly what it sounds like. It's this raw, sonic manifesto of just being completely, utterly exhausted. Some of the Spanish sources we reviewed use the word hartazgo, which captures it perfectly. It's that deep, spiritual, psychological weariness. Bone tired.
And the album title, Anti-Icon, that's the central paradox we need to explore, isn't it? He spends his whole career pushing back against the cult of celebrity, fighting being encasillado, pigeonholed, put in a box by the industry.
Right. He actively rejects being an icon. But then, ironically, the sheer force of his fame cements him as an icon for a whole subculture that often shares those same anti-establishment feelings.
So the song Fed Up is him grappling with the fallout of becoming the very thing he resisted.
Precisely. It's his confrontation with the very real, very painful consequences of that unwanted icon status. So our mission today really is to cut through the aggression, the noise, and apply some very specific academic tools.
Tools from all over the map, it looks like. Psychology, semiotics.
Economics, even theology,
Yeah.
We're using these frameworks to sort of elevate the track, to transform it from just, an angry song into this complex, detailed document of a person in profound crisis.
Okay, so how are we structuring this? You mentioned 4 key lyrics.
That's right. They're like our guideposts. First, we hit the crisis of connection and coping, fed up with a fake love. Then that really stark economic paradox, got a crib for my mama.
Then the identity crisis.
Sick of reading my name. The loss of self in the public eye. And finally, the ultimate metaphysical throwdown. No God or Satan gonna make me understand.
Got it. Let's dive in.
Yeah.
Okay, part 1. Let's jump straight into that first lyric because it really sets the stage. No ambiguity here. Fed up. I'm fed up with the drugs, fed up with the fake love, put the gun to my brain, go bang.
Yeah, it's incredibly stark. This line, right off the bat, it presents this collision, the total failure of both social connection and chemical coping mechanisms happening simultaneously.
2 pillars just crumbling at the same time.
Exactly. We're seeing the end point of these 2 massive stressors.
Yeah.
The relentless pressure of what he calls fake love, this relational falsity, and the definitive collapse of his attempt to, medicate his way out of it with drugs. #, performed in 1.1, ICPO1. The psychopathology of relational falsity, the fake love stressor. So let's start with the fake love part. The framework we're using here is the psychopathology of relational falsity. Basically, we're looking at how constantly being in social interactions that feel false, that are false, creates this chronic, inescapable stress.
And that stress leads to actual psychological damage, pathology.
Right. And when Ghostemane says fake love, we need to understand it's probably not just, a bad breakup or flaky friends, although maybe that's part of it too.
Given his context as this massive musician, it feels bigger.
It's much bigger. The sources suggest fake love is this umbrella term for the entire parasitic economy of interaction that defines celebrity.
Parasitic economy. Unpack that a bit.
Think about it. You've got the music industry constantly demanding performance, output, the brand. You've got PR teams spinning narratives, maybe smoothing over the rough edges, or even distorting his reality entirely.
And then there's the fans. Millions of them. Isn't that supposed to be the upside, the validation?
Well, yes and no. It's often transactional adoration. The fans, they aren't really interacting with Eric Whitney, the person. They're interacting with Ghostemane, the sign, the image.
They project their own stuff onto him.
Completely. All their needs, their anxieties, their desire for rebellion, their identity formation, it all gets projected onto this figure. He becomes this giant mirror, forced to reflect millions of often contradictory, really intense emotions, and that demands constant emotional labor from him.
A performance. He has to perform alignment with those projections even if they don't match his internal state.
He has to constantly perform authenticity, ironically. So his entire public existence becomes defined by this performance without authenticity. Every interview, every stage dive, every interaction is potentially a transaction designed to maintain the icon, not a genuine human connection.
That sounds exhausting. Just fundamentally exhausting.
It is. And this is where the sociology of emotions comes really useful. Thinkers like Arlie Hochschild talk about emotional labor, managing your feelings to create a specific public display. For a celebrity like Ghostemane, this isn't just occasional, it's constant. It's his job. Performing the icon, the nihilist, the rebel leader, whatever the expectation is.
And that kind of chronic performance, day in, day out, it must create a serious internal split, a fracture.
It leads to what psychologists call extreme cognitive dissonance.
Yeah.
I mean, we're fundamentally wired for genuine connection, right? For interactions that aren't managed or mediated. When that basic human need slams head-on repeatedly into a reality where every interaction feels transactional, where sincerity feels impossible because you're always playing a role, the psychological toll is enormous.
The self starts to fragment.
Yeah. The internal voice, Eric Whitney's voice, gets drowned out, suffocated by the public persona, the Ghostemane mask.
It's the ultimate irony, isn't it? Being surrounded by millions of people who supposedly adore you, but experiencing this profound, absolute isolation. The adoration itself is the prison.
The adoration is the cage. You nailed it. And the ultimate horrifying consequence of living with that unbearable chronic dissonance, that fragmentation, is the line itself. Put the gun to my brain, go bang.
It's presented almost like a logical escape.
Almost. Death is put on the table as the only way out of the psychological prison of this constant falsity. The really chilling insight here isn't just that he's depressed. It's the perception that oblivion, nothingness, might actually be more authentic, more real, more trustworthy than the life he's forced to perform. It's an extreme symptom of total emotional burnout. Hashtag 1.2 pharmacology existential of nihilism, the drugs as failed solution.
Okay, so if the fake love is this corrosive social disease, let's look at the other half of that opening assault. Fed up. I'm fed up with the drugs. You mentioned analyzing this through pharmacology existential beyond just addiction.
Exactly. We need to see the drug use not just as like a bad habit or a moral failing, but as a strategic, albeit deeply flawed, attempted automedication. Self-medication for a problem that isn't just chemical, but existential.
An existential problem.
Meaning, the root issue here is arguably philosophical. It's nihilism. It's the void, the vacuum of meaning created by his experiences. If fame is empty, if success feels hollow, if relationships are fake, what's the point?
So the substance abuse is his way of trying to fill that void, or at least escape the feeling of it.
Precisely. Faced with this profound emptiness, this meaninglessness born from empty fame and fake love, he turns to pharmacology. Substance is designed to alter brain chemistry, right? To provide escape, maybe temporary euphoria, or often just numbness, anesthesia from the existential pain.
He's trying to chemically engineer a meaning, or at least chemically deny the lack of one, trying to fill a spiritual hole with a pill or a powder.
That's a good way to put it. But if the drugs offered some relief, even temporarily, didn't they work on some level? What's the tipping point where they stop being a solution and become part of the problem?
Yeah, when does the medicine become the poison?
That is the crucial question. And the answer is right there in the lyric. Fed up. It signals the failure point. See, drugs often work on what's called a hedonic treadmill. Initially, yeah, they provide powerful artificial relief, a break, anesthesia.
It doesn't last.
It doesn't last because they're trying to solve a philosophical problem, this lack of meaning, with a purely chemical fix. So the solution has to escalate. Tolerance builds, the effect diminishes, and the underlying existential dread, the original problem, comes rushing back, often even stronger than before.
So when he says fed up, that's the moment of realization. The tool he was using for denial has broken.
It's the critical turning point. The moment the drug definitively shifts from being perceived as a solution, however temporary, to being a major component of the overall suffering. The chemical crutch hasn't just failed, it's actively making things worse.
It's demanding more money, more time, more energy, but providing less and less relief.
Leading to this state of, you could call it, pharmacological despair. And when that chemical attempt to medicate the spiritual or existential problem collapses, what's the next perceived option for silencing the pain? The ideation articulated right after, go bang. It emerges as the desperate next step when the drugs fail. Hashtag 1.3 clinical and neurobiological specificity, deepening the drug use.
That repetition, fed up, it feels like more than just emphasis. Clinically, does that repetition signify something?
Oh, definitely. That insistence, that repetition is a strong clinical marker for severe emotional burnout, hopelessness. It's central to conditions like major depressive disorders. It screams exhaustion.
And the lyrics don't just say drugs generically, they get very specific later, mentioning on a benzo bender withdrawal, never go back, no. That sounds technically precise.
It is. And this specificity is incredibly important. It grounds the suffering in a concrete, verifiable neurobiological reality. It's not just poetic angst. It's describing a specific, a very dangerous physiological process.
Okay, so benzodiazepines, benzos. What did they do, and why is withdrawal so significant here?
Right. Benzos are powerful sedatives, central nervous system depressants. People know them for anxiety, like Xanax or Valium. Their mechanism is key. They boost the effect of GABA. GABA is the brain's main inhibitory neurotransmitter. Think of it like the brain's natural brake pedal. Benzos essentially push harder on that brake, calming everything down.
Creating profound calm, but also dependence if used heavily, right? The brain gets used to the external help.
Precisely. Heavy, prolonged use like a benzo bender leads to significant physiological dependence. The brain adapts. It downregulates its own GABA system because the drug is doing the heavy lifting.
So when you suddenly stop or cut back drastically the withdrawal, what happens?
The brain is suddenly released from that intense inhibition. It's like taking your foot off the brake on a steep hill, but the accelerator is also jammed. The result is a violent neurobiological rebound effect. We call it neuronal hyperexcitability.
Hyperexcitability. What does that feel like? How does it connect back to the overall fed-up feeling?
Clinically, it's often described as a state of sheer terror. The brain, liking its usual calming signals and suddenly overactive, fires uncontrollably. Physically, this can mean tremors, sweating, racing heart, intense insomnia. Psychologically, it manifests as overwhelming panic attacks, paranoia, sometimes hallucinations, and in severe cases, life-threatening seizures.
So the very anxiety and dread the drugs were supposed to treat come back, but amplified, terrifyingly.
Exponentially worse. The withdrawal state magnifies the underlying psychic pain described in the song The Exhaustion, the feeling of being trapped. The brain that was artificially quieted is now essentially attacking itself with activity. The chemical solution has betrayed him, become an active tormentor.
It makes the fed-up feeling biological, not just psychological.
Exactly. The lyric details this incredibly vicious cycle. Use drugs to numb existential dread, develop dependence, attempt to stop, triggering withdrawal, experience amplified dread and physical agony due to neurobiological rebound, leading directly back to acute suicidal ideation, go bang, as the perceived only escape from that torment.
Wow. So when you look at it like that, the song really does become more than just music.
It functions almost like a public health document. It starkly illustrates an extremely high-risk profile for suicidology. Severe depression intertwined with acute, physically dangerous substance withdrawal. It's a snapshot of the brain and the spirit collapsing together.
Okay, let's shift gears slightly. The crisis of self, the failed coping mechanisms. Now it slams right into the baffling reality of his success. This next line is just stark. Got a crib for my mama, because I don't think I'm going to live too much longer.
Yeah, this line is incredibly arresting. It's one of those powerful contradictions in the whole piece. You have this act, buying a house, a crib, which is almost universally seen as a symbol of stability, success, putting down roots, looking towards the future.
Right, security, long-term investment.
Exactly. But here, it's explicitly causally linked to a premonition of his own imminent death. The question isn't just why he bought the house, but why this act of providing security for someone else is framed entirely by his own planned exit. Hashtag 2.1, the effective economy of premonitory mortality. So the framework we can use here is what we might call the effective economy of premonitory mortality. It sounds complex, but the idea is simple.
Break it down.
We're looking at how a standard economic act, buying a high-value asset, the house becomes completely saturated with intense emotional meaning, the effective part. Specifically because it's being done under the shadow of death. Not just any death, but anticipated premonitory death. Death he seems to foresee, possibly intends.
So this isn't him celebrating his success like, look, Ma, I made it. It's something much darker. an emotional calculation made against his own guaranteed absence.
Precisely. It reframes the entire act. If we look at it through, say, economic anthropology, exchanging goods, especially something significant like property, is fundamentally about solidifying social bonds. Here, the mother-son bond.
But the context twists it.
Completely. It's not about building a shared future. It's about closing accounts. It feels like a final act, a settling of debts, a last disbursement of duties before checking out.
You also mentioned thanatology, the study of death and dying. How does that lens help us understand buying the house?
Thanatology looks at how people prepare for their end, both psychologically and logistically. This house purchase looks exactly like a form of proactive legacy planning, but under the darkest circumstances. It's fulfilling that last major filial responsibility before his planned, voluntary departure from the scene.
It's an act of love, then. Tangible love.
It is. And crucially, it seems like an act of authentic love. Tangible, concrete, providing real security, which stands in incredibly sharp contrast to the pervasive fake love he described earlier, the transactional stuff he gets from the industry and fame.
That distinction feels key. He might feel incapable of offering his mother continued presence or emotional stability. Those resources are depleted by fame, but he can use the financial capital he's earned.
The one seemingly clean resource left, perhaps. He uses it to ensure her material security when he's gone. It's what we've termed the suicidal transfer.
Suicidal transfer. Explain that.
He's converting his financial capital earned, ironically, through the very fame-driven, soul-crushing existence that's killing him psychologically into a fixed asset, an asset designed solely for his mother's future well-being after he's removed himself from the equation. The capital becomes a substitute for his presence.
It's like estate planning, but specifically for someone planning not to be there.
It is exactly that. It explores this grim moral calculus. My life feels unsalvageable, broken beyond repair, but I can execute this one final, clean, responsible act. He transfers the value to the house because he plans to zero himself out. He pays the ultimate price, potentially his life, so his mother gets this one uncorrupted piece of value generated by his suffering.
It's incredibly poignant because it shows deep love, but simultaneously tragic because it reveals just how complete his resignation is.
The act itself is both loving and a testament to the depth of his despair. Hashtag 2.2 material wealth versus psychological well-being. The $1 million couch.
The song drives home this paradox of wealth elsewhere, too, right? There's that line, I'm in a $1 million couch, back then I was in a van. That contrast is just extreme.
Yeah, that imagery is perfect. Van life to $1 million couch. It's the ultimate rags to riches trajectory, almost a caricature of the American dream realized.
But the tone isn't celebratory at all.
Not in the slightest. And that image, that specific contrast, is the perfect gateway to talk about a really fundamental concept in economics and psychology, the Easterlin paradox. And the mechanism behind it, which is hedonic adaptation.
Okay, let's define those for listeners, especially how they apply right here.
Sure. The Easterlin paradox, named after the economist Richard Easterlin, basically observed that, yes, money makes you happier up to a certain point when it gets you out of poverty, meets basic needs for shelter, food, security.
But after that?
After that point is met, further increases in wealth, even massive increases, bring rapidly diminishing returns on happiness, sometimes zero returns.
We just get used to the new level of luxury. The fancy car becomes just the car. The $1 million couch becomes just a couch.
That's hedonic adaptation in action. We adapt to the new baseline. And Ghostemane, in this lyric, seems to be describing a state of complete, maybe even rapid hedonic adaptation. He's literally sitting on this ultimate symbol of opulence, the $1 million couch. But it's clearly providing zero net well-being.
In fact, it sounds like the opposite.
Exactly. All the problems associated with getting to that couch, the fame, the isolation, the fake love, the pressure, seem to have created a net deficit of happiness. The external, objective markers of success are masking an internal psychological failure. Economic capital does not equal psychological capital.
It makes the whole success story into an indictment. You reach the supposed peak, and it's worse than the bottom.
And this ties back beautifully, actually, to classical sociology, to Emile Durkheim's concept of anomie.
Anomie, that's like a state of normlessness, disorientation.
Exactly. Durkheim argued it arises from a breakdown of social bonds, shared values, clear norms. And while we often think of it in terms of poverty or social upheaval, Durkheim also recognized it can happen with sudden, extreme upward mobility,
How does that apply to going from a van to $1 million couch?
because that kind of rapid, jarring shift can rip someone out of their grounded community, their established social context, the van, and thrust them into this entirely alien environment of high celebrity and wealth, the couch. Instead of integration, it can lead to profound isolation and anomie.
You don't know the rules anymore. Relationships feel different, maybe purely transactional. Trust evaporates.
Precisely. The artist suddenly lacks clear social benchmarks. Maybe moral anchors feel shaky. Despite sitting on $1 million couch, he's potentially rootless, disconnected, adrift in this sea of wealth and fame. The cost of that couch wasn't just financial. It might have been his entire social and psychological foundation.
So, sitting on that couch isn't comfortable. It's a painful reminder of the emptiness and the broken connections that came with acquiring it. The success itself is the source of the sickness.
The wealth bought the mama house, fulfilling that final duty. But for him, it seemed to have bought only acute psychological pain, disorientation, confirming that money, beyond a certain point, just can't buy well-being. That's the tragedy of anomie, wrapped up in the paradox of success.
Okay, so we've covered the internal collapse, the failed coping, the paradox of wealth. Now the crisis seems to turn outward. It becomes about the battle for control over his own identity in the public sphere. This next lyric feels central to that. I'm fed up with the fame. I'm sick of reading my name in any other way than I intended.
Yes, this line is incredibly sophisticated. It's a lament, really, about losing authorship over your own self, your own meaning. And to really get at this, we need to bring in semiotics, the study of signs and symbols. Hashtag 3.1, Semiotics of Personal Brand Dissonance. So in semiotics, we understand the world through signs. A sign has two parts: the signifier, the physical form, like a word or an image, and the signify, the concept or meaning it represents.
So Ghostemane, the name itself, is the signifier.
Exactly. And as the creator, Eric Whitney, intended that signifier to carry a specific cluster of meanings, the signified. Anti-icon, rebellion, occult exploration, darkness, rejection of the mainstream, deep psychological pain. He tried to encode it with a very particular message.
He was trying to build an authentic anti-brand, essentially.
You could say that. But the moment that sign, Ghostemane, enters the public domain, the marketplace of fame, it gets interpreted, processed, and ultimately redefined by others. By critics, by the industry, by the fans. The motherfuckers misunderstanding me, as he puts it elsewhere.
They perform what you called a sequestro, a hijacking of the sign.
Precisely. They hijack the signifier and attach their own meanings, their own signifieds to it. They might simplify him into an easily digestible idol figure, or a specific genre label he resists, or a commodity, or maybe worse of all, a meme that completely trivializes the intended depth or darkness.
And this creates a painful gap, a dissonance.
That's the core of it, personal brand dissonance. The artist fundamentally loses control over what his own identity means in the world. The fed-up feeling here stems from the sheer exhaustion of constantly watching this sign he created, his name, his persona, being consumed and interpreted in ways that radically violate his original artistic intention.
He's trying to communicate something complex, maybe contradictory, and the machinery of fame just flattens it into something simple and sellable.
It's a form of semantic violence, really. He built this identity as a shield or a statement, and now he's forced to watch it being used as a projection screen for things he fundamentally disagrees with. The market forces, the audience's need for simple narratives, the media's need for labels, they all prove much stronger than his individual resistance to being turned into an icon.
He's trapped inside a distorted public version of himself that he can't control or correct. The anti-icon becomes the icon against his will.
And he's rendered, in a way, semantically homeless. The very tools that brought him success, the ability to reach a wide audience, are the same tools that distort and commodify his identity. He succeeded in building a platform, only to find it's a stage for a play he didn't write. Hashtag 3.2, media theory and the public-private breach.
This whole idea of losing control over meaning, this misunderstanding, it reminds me of Stuart Hall's work in media theory. The encoding-decoding model seems really relevant here.
Absolutely vital. Hall's model is perfect for explaining why this misunderstanding he complains about isn't just accidental bad luck, it's systemic.
Explain how that model works in this context.
Okay, so Hall says the creator of a message, in this case, Ghostemane, the artist, acts as the encoder. He carefully crafts his message, embedding his intended meanings, darkness, anti-icon status, etc., into the sign, the music, the name, the image.
But the audience doesn't just passively receive it.
No, The public, the media, the fans, they act as decoders, and they don't decode the message in a vacuum. They interpret it through their own filters. Their cultural background, their expectations of the genre, their personal needs, the dominant media narratives already in circulation.
So if the audience is primed to look for the next big thing, the next subculture leader, they might decode his message of nihilistic rejection as, ironically, the exact opposite, like the rallying cry for a new movement he should lead.
Precisely. They might filter out the nuances, the self-loathing, the contradictions, and latch onto the aggression or the aesthetic in a way that fits their needs, whether that's simple rebellion, escapism, or even just identifying with a cool brand. The result is a systematic distortion between the encoded meaning and the decoded meaning.
Which leads directly back to that line, sick of reading my name in any other way than I intended. It highlights this permanent, painful gap, doesn't it? The breach between the private person, Eric Whitney, dealing with real pain, and the public text, Ghostemane, the spectacle.
That public-private breach is where the suffering lies. Fame essentially converts the individual into a public text, open to interpretation and appropriation by anyone. The fed-up feeling is the exhaustion of constantly trying to bridge that gap, to correct the narrative, to reassert his original encoding.
But it's a losing battle.
It often feels like it. He can put out interviews, write manifestos, release more music, trying to clarify his intent, but the decoding power of the mass audience and media machine is just overwhelming. Every action he takes is immediately sucked into the public text and reinterpreted. He can't escape it.
So the fight against fame becomes quite literally a fight against the constant misinterpretation of the self, a fight for semantic control.
And the more famous he gets, the bigger the audience, the stronger that public text becomes, and the harder it is for the private individual, Eric Whitney, to feel any connection to or control over his own meaning in the world. Fame, in this sense, can be the destruction of authentic self-authorship.
Okay, we've reached the final core lyric. And this one feels like it moves beyond the personal, the social, the economic.
Yeah.
It goes straight for the metaphysical foundations. Never again will I put my faith in a religion. No God or Satan going to make me understand I'm dealt a bad hand.
Yeah, this is a powerful statement. It's the ultimate declaration of philosophical and metaphysical resignation. And it's crucial to understand, this isn't just standard rock and roll atheism or casual blasphemy.
It feels deeper than that.
Much deeper. He's not just rejecting God. He's rejecting Satan, too. He's rejecting the entire framework of established metaphysical narratives, both the benevolent, God's plan, divine justice, and the malevolent, satanic forces, cosmic evil, as fundamentally inadequate. Neither side, he's saying, can explain or justify or even make sense of his suffering. Hashtag 4.1 Negative Theology of Trauma, the rejection of all frames. In the subcultures Ghostemane is associated with, using satanic or occult imagery is often a symbol of rebellion, of choosing the other side, but that's not what seems to be happening here.
He's not picking a team. He's saying the whole game is rigged or irrelevant.
Exactly. He's rejecting the entire duality, the whole good versus evil battlefield. And one way to analyze this is through a concept called the negative theology of trauma.
Okay, negative theology or theologia apophatica, that's defining God by what he is not, right? Because human concepts fall short. How does trauma fit into that?
Well, first, we have to acknowledge the psychological impact of trauma itself. We know Ghostemane experienced significant trauma, like losing his father young, plus the ongoing trauma of this extreme lifestyle. Trauma, fundamentally, shatters a person's existing marcos de sentido, their frameworks of meaning, the ways they understood the world, fairness, purpose. They just crumble when faced with inexplicable, irredeemable suffering.
So the trauma makes the old explanations like, it's God's plan or the devil made me do it, feel completely hollow.
Utterly insufficient. They become inadequate containers for the raw, overwhelming reality of the pain. So he's almost applying a kind of nihilistic negative theology to his own experience. He defines his situation by what cannot explain it. Neither the promise of divine order, God, nor the narrative of cosmic sabotage, Satan, can make sense of, let alone redeem the bad hand he feels he's been dealt.
It's a brute fact that sits outside those systems.
It's positioned as a raw, existential fact that simply refuses to be comforted or explained away by any external belief system, divine or demonic. It's the ultimate declaration that his suffering is, without inherent meaning, without transcendence, and therefore, ultimately, without the possibility of conventional redemption.
The isolation we talked about earlier, the social isolation, the psychological fragmentation, it reaches its peak here as metaphysical isolation. He's alone, facing an indifferent universe, without even the cold comfort of a structured narrative of cosmic conflict.
And that distinction is vital. Standard rebellion often involves choosing the dark side as a counter-narrative. This is different. This is the abandonment of the entire cosmic conflict narrative. It's the ultimate expression of that hartazgo, that soul-deep weariness. I am too fundamentally fed up to even believe in the fight anymore. Hashtag tag tag 4.2 philosophy and game theory.
This complete rejection of metaphysical frameworks of God and Satan, it forces us into conversation with existential philosophy, doesn't it? Where does this sentiment fit?
Oh, absolutely. The explicit rejection of a divine foundation. The idea that no God will make him understand. It resonates strongly with Nietzsche's famous declaration of the death of God.
Meaning the collapse of traditional religious and moral anchors leaves the individual facing, what, chaos?
Chaos, yeah. And the profound, terrifying burden of having to create meaning for oneself in a world that no longer offers a prepackaged divine blueprint. Ghostemane seems to be living out the painful, immediate consequence of that void, that absence of universal truth or justice.
But his tone, it doesn't sound like Nietzschean empowerment, like the celebration of the will to power, creating new values. It sounds more resigned, defeated almost.
That's a crucial distinction. You're right. The feeling aligns perhaps more closely with someone like Albert Camus. Camus famously explored the concept of the absurd.
The absurd being
The clash. The fundamental collision between our deep-seated human yearning for meaning, for answers, for justice, for order, and the cold, silent, indifferent universe that offers absolutely none of those things. The universe simply does not care that he feels dealt a bad hand. That line is almost a textbook definition of recognizing the absurd.
So he's caught between maybe a Nietzschean rage that wants to smash the false idols and a Camusian resignation that accepts the fundamental indifference, the unfairness of it all.
It feels like a synthesis of that struggle, yeah. Which brings us to the final analytic layer for this line, the metaphor itself. I'm dealt a bad hand.
Just a common phrase for bad luck.
On the surface, yes. But if we analyze it through the lens of, say, game theory and probability, the metaphor takes on a specific weight.
How so?
Framing life explicitly as being dealt a bad hand in a game like poker reinforces a powerful sense of determinism. It suggests life is fundamentally a game of chance, based on imperfect information, governed by random elements totally outside the player's control right from the start.
He's not seeing himself as an active player who made bad choices leading to this point.
No. He's positioning himself as a passive recipient of an inherently unfavorable starting configuration. The initial deal was bad. You didn't choose the cards. You're just stuck playing them. Or, in his case, feeling so overwhelmed by the bad hand that the only move left seems to be folding, walking away from the table entirely.
So the metaphor isn't just descriptive, it's justifying the fed-up feeling. It backs up the helplessness.
Exactly. It suggests the initial conditions may be genetic predispositions, early life trauma, the pressures that industry he fell into were fundamentally stacked against him. The core message becomes one of near-total helplessness. It's not about playing the game badly and losing. It's about being dealt an unwinnable hand from the get-go. It serves as a final, bleak, almost logical justification for his total withdrawal and rejection of all explanatory systems. Hashtag tag outro.
Wow. Okay, so this deep dive. We started with what sounds like, on the surface, a very aggressive, maybe even simple trap metal track. But walking through it like this, applying these different lenses, it reveals something incredibly complex.
Absolutely. We've moved from just hearing the visceral rage and suffering to actually analyzing the precise mechanics of a social, economic, psychological, and even philosophical collapse, all embedded within these lyrics.
We really connected the dots across disciplines, didn't we? From the nitty-gritty neurobiology of benzo withdrawal
To Durkheim's concept of anomie triggered by sudden wealth, to the semantic violence of celebrity branding using semiotics, and finally landing on these profound philosophical statements about the absurd and a kind of traumatic negative theology.
It transforms the song into this remarkably dense cultural document.
It really does. And I think the core insight, what we can really extract from Fed Up when we look at it this way, is that it serves as a potent diagnosis of a very modern 21st century kind of pathology.
What pathology is that specifically?
It diagnoses the profound insufficiency of material success to guarantee any kind of psychological well-being. It diagnoses the crisis of authentic human connection in an age saturated by transactional relationships and the pressures of fame. And it highlights the devastating systemic impact of untreated complex mental and existential illness even on someone who has achieved incredible external success.
So Ghostemane's personal crisis becomes a kind of commentary on bigger structural issues, the failures of the celebrity machine, the potential nihilistic dead end of hypermodernity.
I think so. The sheer density of the issues packed into this primal scream of Artazgo, of being utterly fed up, arguably contains more insight and, yes, academic rigor than many formal essays on the same topics.
Okay, so before we wrap up, let's leave our listeners with that final provocative thought. Building on everything we've unpacked, we've established how the lyrics document this multi-layered crisis. But what about the sound itself?
Right. We have to return to the music's aesthetic, the actual sonic experience. The question for you, the listener, is this. Does the sheer, uncompromising, visceral intensity of trap metal as a genre, the harsh electronic distortion, the pounding, aggressive rhythms, the vocal delivery that often borders on screaming, does that sound actively reinforce these themes?
Reinforce the trauma, the semantic hijacking, the nihilism in a way that, say, a sad folk ballad or purely philosophical text just couldn't capture.
Exactly. How does the music's aesthetic violence, its sonic engineering, become an essential nonverbal component of the message of being fed up with existence itself?
Is the sonic aggression, in a way, the only authentic language left for him? The only way to try and reclaim some authorship over his sign, even if it means shattering the expectations of the very system that built him?
Something to think about. How the form becomes inseparable from the function, how the art becomes a direct manifestation of the suffering it describes.
Definitely something to chew on. Thanks for exploring the depths with us today. We'll catch you on the next deep dive.